Good afternoon. My name is Sarah Gomes with Job Service Kalispell, and welcome to our November Blueprint for Business Success seminar. Please take a moment to help us identify the businesses benefiting from today's seminar by entering your name, title, business you represent, and your city in the chat box. We do ask that you please be polite and respectful to all attendees and the presenter. Attendees are muted during the seminar, but we encourage you to use the chat box for asking questions, which will be answered at the end of the presentation. Completing the 2-minute anonymous survey at the end of the seminar helps us improve this program and provide meaningful topics and content. Today, we have the privilege of hearing from Deb Broadbent as she presents on the topic of performance management. It's all about the communication. Deb holds the Senior Professional in Human Resources Certificate and is a Society for Human Resource Management Senior Certified Professional. She is Glacier Bank's Senior Vice President and has been a member of their senior leadership team for the past 13 years. Prior to joining Glacier Bank, Deb worked in HR and leadership roles for Kalispell Regional Hospital and other Montana businesses. Deb embraces all segments of human resources and has focused much of her professional development in the compensation, performance management, and employee relations sectors. Here is Deb Broadbent.
Thank you, Sarah. I appreciate this opportunity a great deal. Today we'll discuss how performance management impacts employee satisfaction, as that in turn impacts business growth, profitability, and reputation. We'll explore some ways to achieve a more positive culture and elevated employee satisfaction. One thing that will become very clear throughout this presentation is that happy workers are better workers. They work harder, they work smarter, they seldom have attendance issues, they self-govern without being monitored and prompted, and they positively impact your organizational culture. Workers really want to know where they stand at all times, and they'll know exactly where they stand if you're effectively managing performance. They'll be commended for doing a good job, and they'll not be marginalized for making mistakes. Their contribution to a company's success is sometimes underestimated. So let's get started. At its very basics, the very most basic explanation about performance management is communication. We all know that the key to any successful relationship is effective and respectful communication. If we can communicate effectively, chances are we'll be able to work together and help our organizations succeed together. Talking about the very basics of performance management, we want to talk about the who, what, when, where, why, and how. We'll talk about those first four just briefly, and we'll spend most of our time today on the more meatier topics, the why and the how. So who benefits from performance management? The simple answer is everyone. It really is a win-win all around. Employees and staff members benefit because they have a clear and concise understanding of the job and its expectations and its organization and the company. Supervisors, managers, and leaders benefit because they become more comfortable in their roles and their ability to lead and manage and redirect as needed. Customers really benefit from performance management because they're served by talented staff members who are well trained, execute the job duties effectively, and they're served accurately. The last three entities here benefit. The business owners, shareholders, and stakeholders benefit greatly from the return on investment of hiring, on business growth, on profitability, on process improvement, which your frontline staff workers can only help you with, and retention of employees. In today's world of work, that's critical. We all know that. So what is performance management? Again, as I said earlier, the simple answer is communication. Although there are seemingly endless approaches and philosophies and forms and tools, it's really the basics are communication. If we think about some of the pieces of performance management, we're talking about providing sincere appreciation and employee recognition to our employees. We're talking about teaching them, training them, mentoring them, coaching them, giving them feedback, accepting feedback. That's one of the most important pieces. We may even be talking about giving an employee a verbal warning when things are not going well, or a performance improvement plan. Maybe we get to a corrective action or a written warning, or even a last chance agreement. And hopefully not often, but occasionally termination in the employment relationship. So when should performance management be done? That really depends. It really starts with the pre-hiring process, not an employee's first mistake. I would say prior to making an offer of employment, we want to be absolutely certain that the applicant has a clear and concise understanding of the position, everything it entails with the organization, and clarity about the organization's expectations, right down to the bare basics, scheduling, attendance, dress code, all of those things. On a continuum, we want to keep the lines of communication open and keep that communication flowing. That's vital. That's a lifeline. On a periodic basis, we'll want to do check-ins and use tools to have discussions about what's working and what might need attention with our employees, and that will contribute to enhanced employee and organizational success. If your organization chooses to use an annual review, and there are many schools of thoughts about that, I'm a strong proponent of it because that annual review can be tremendously valuable, both in the event of great employee success in your organization, and maybe even as importantly or possibly more importantly, when the employment relationship doesn't work out. So where should we do performance management? Well, sometimes it's simply a discussion, and privacy isn't necessary. And in fact, if a manager or supervisor makes it safe and welcome for others to chime in and give discussion, it can foster a culture of positivity. Ongoing communication and feedback loops regarding, let's say, a process or a project, progress, and workflows generally can be done in the workplace without the need for total privacy. If a manager, again, has welcomed feedback and made it safe for employees to express their observations, the location for that kind of performance management is far less critical. Recognition can be more publicly shared, but only if an employee is comfortable with receiving recognition in that way. And you'll want to be sure about that before you offer recognition. Some folks are very uncomfortable with public recognition. Others really thrive on it. So know your employees. Ask your employees. It's perfectly fine to ask. Coaching, warning, correcting should all be done in private, of course. The dignity of the employee must be considered paramount if you're going to reach the goal of helping that employee achieve greater success and, in turn, greater organizational success. If a form or a tool is used in your periodic or annual evaluations, those should be private, timely, and uninterrupted meetings. Dedicating time to this employee and to this process will speak volumes. And conversely, if you allow interruptions or you fail to safeguard their privacy, that will speak volumes as well, kind of in a different direction. For the annual evaluation, don't delay. Your employees know when their review is due, and to be late really relays the message that the review, and therefore the employee, really isn't a priority to you. So let's get into the meatier topics, the why. Why embrace performance management? Decades and decades of studies have proven there's a compelling and predictable link between a business's success and productivity and profitability and a contented workforce. These studies are really irrefutable at this point, and they impact your ability to attract and retain high performers and your organizational culture. Your organizational culture begins with performance management. So if you think about it, employees who are being managed by one of your supervisors they're satisfied when they have a manager who is mature and treats them well. Employees who are satisfied in their job enjoy their work in their organization. They believe their job to be important. They feel their contributions are impactful. They take pride in the company. They promote the company. They feel it's safe to make suggestions and communicate openly, and this can be an invaluable tool to an organization. A supervisor or manager may not know little tweaks that can be made that will make efficacy and efficiencies a much, much greater situation. And employees who are satisfied with their jobs are 5 times less likely to quit. You all know, if you're in the position of looking for employees, that getting employees and retaining employees right now is critical. So we want to keep our employees satisfied when we can. Conversely, employees who are dissatisfied usually quit their manager before they quit their company. We'll talk a little bit more about that today. But that really wipes out the organization's investment in the hiring process, in the training, in the institutional knowledge that goes out the door, and it puts you right back at the beginning with lost time, energy, and resources. And it can also impact the organizational reputation as an employer of choice or not an employer of choice. And this can hamper your ability to attract and retain high performers. So we want to keep our employees happy as much as we possibly can. And to that end, I would say people want feedback. None of us want to be measured, but we all want to know when we score. If you think of the competitive sports analogy to that, I think of small children who are learning to play, for instance, basketball, and maybe they're in Rotary basketball, and on Saturday they're in the gym playing. And if one of those little kiddos makes a basket, and their parents and grandparents and everyone on the sidelines are cheering, it's just an uplifting to them. Well, people of all ages are the same. They want to know when they're scoring, and so we need to be giving them feedback and offering it up to them to let them know where they are. And we do that with meaningful, concise, and timely communication. It helps them better understand their performance, and it creates relevant and achievable goals. I would tell you that a quick thank you goes a long way, as long as it's authentic. It can't be superficial, it can't be silly, it needs to be just a sincere thank you. So the fact that you notice when an employee goes above and beyond and make a comment about it speaks volumes. The evaluation process also must speak to the employee's strengths and weaknesses, organizational skills and competency gaps, and other performance trends as well. Those on the spur, on the fly comments when you're noting something, they go a long way. Improving the quality, quantity, and relevance of feedback gives an employee a clearer, more actionable understanding of what they need to do to be successful at their jobs as well. So how do we keep our top talent from walking out the door? I would suggest to you that it almost always boils down to the individual's immediate supervisor. While compensation, benefits, and perks go a long way, retention depends on the supervisor. That supervisor needs to be a solemn leader. So if you want to retain your top talent, you have to demonstrate to your team that performance counts. This means that you must devote much of your time encouraging your high performers and not, quote unquote, watering the weeds. And I realize this is a strong statement, it's fairly harsh, and it's somewhat counterintuitive. But our frequent flyers and our needy employees and those who have complaints regularly, really, when we're managing those people, it takes away our ability to push our businesses forward. So we want to make sure that our supervisors, starting with our supervisors, I should say, that they treat our employees like the best customer we have. And in that case, it's a win-win for all. I said earlier that decades of studies talk about how organizations and people behave and how to maximize the experience for all so that employee productivity, engagement, and retention is strongly influenced. But satisfied employees, again, are likely to be higher performers. But what's employee satisfaction? That varies by individual. I might be satisfied with a heavy workload or lots of deadlines, and someone else might be satisfied with a much different situation. So again, it varies by individual. But globally, where there's role or performance ambiguity, when people are confused or uncertain about expectations, employee satisfaction is diminished. It is affected by the quality of supervision, though. Workers want supervisors who are emotionally mature, who are predictable, who are dependable, cooperative, and knowledgeable. So we want to make sure that our supervisors, in addition to our employees, really know that how this organization wants their staff to be treated. Companies need to be very certain of this so that those 1 out of 2 employees who quit that don't do so to escape their boss aren't walking out the door. Because trust me, your high achievers know who your non-performers are and what you are or aren't doing about it. So if you accept mediocre work or bad attitudes, that kind of thing, and mediocre performers, you're basically saying that's adequate in your department, your branch, or your organization. And I would say also that your real performance standards are not the behaviors you expect, but the behaviors you accept. So as we said earlier, employees will work hard for a leader who's emotionally mature, predictable, dependable, cooperative, and knowledgeable. But we also need to communicate clear expectations right from the onset, as I said, before they even accept the job or before we offer the job. We want to be sure that the objectives are clear then and on an ongoing basis. If you're expecting quality work, your people need to know what that looks like. So give feedback that supports, informs, inspires. Be very specific and describe the situation, the behavior, the result. And with those clear-cut communications, your employees will know what your expectations are, and they'll strive to work for those expectations. If your leaders or your supervisors ignore your employees' successes, their needs, their conflicts, their bad behavior, or their lack of respect for others, those leaders will lose credibility. They'll lose touch with employees, and oftentimes they won't even know it, because employees will continue to politely converse with their leaders even though the credibility is gone. So you can lose credibility, not even know it as a leader. It does destroy trust, it endangers our integrity, it damages our organizational success, and we miss out on the joy of ordinary people doing extraordinary things to achieve success. I have some great stories along that line where groups of people, groups of employees have pushed businesses that were on the brink of going out of business to major success. And I know that we won't have time in this presentation today to talk about those, but there are some amazing stories about extraordinary things that groups of people have done to achieve success for their organization. So those are some of the whys, but let's get into the how. So how is performance management successfully executed? And really, there is no one size fits all. You might be in an organization of 2 employees, you might be in an organization of 10,000 employees, and your approach and your tools will be different in each of those. But regardless of the variables, the very core of all of them are effective communication. So we're going to talk today about some of the tools, the approaches that performance management utilizes, and some of those may resonate with you and some may not. I would say we would want to start with an intentional and focused onboarding. That first month or so is just critical for keeping an employee engaged, making them feel at home. We all know it's not a comfortable place to be the new guy or new girl. You want to say, where's the restroom? Where's the pencil sharpener? Where do I go? Do I take a break? We need to be very intentional and very focused on attending to those new employees until they feel relaxed a little bit. The anxiety of starting a new job is one of the top stressors that psychologists discuss. And so we really want to be, again, intentional and focused with our onboarding. We want to include daily coaching and feedback so that our employees know where they stand. Remember I said, like in the analogy of the sports with the little kiddos playing rotary basketball, they want to know where they stand. So give them feedback every day. Give them a high five. Tell them when they're doing a good job, and help them if they get off track or they're not sure what they should be doing. You'll see in here that we have this continuous communication loop, and that's really the core of our performance management. And that'll be interspersed amongst all of our more formal tools and our more focused and intentional approaches. At Glacier Bank, we like to do a 1-month check-in email to our new employees, and we require a response coming back. And at that 1-month checkup, or that 1-month email that we send out, we ask them, has this company met your expectations that you had when you applied for and were offered the position? And if not, please let us know how and why. Has your supervisor welcomed you? Would you share your assessment of the training you've had so far? What part of your job do you enjoy? Or is there any challenge that you're having a difficult time overcoming? Is there anything we should be concerned about? Just asking these questions to touch bases with them at 1 month is critical to those employees feeling like they have a voice. And again, I'm going to go back to that importance of onboarding. There are times that you can lose an employee very early on, a month or 2 in. They may have been placed with a supervisor or a leader that isn't quite a match for them. We all have different affinities and we all have different personalities that we align more readily with. And we might have hired someone and put them with a supervisor that they really don't click with. They might be a strong performer that if we keep them for years, they may become one of the most loyal employees ever. But if that relationship with that supervisor isn't quite on track in the beginning, if we hear about it early on, we can make some adjustments or make some changes and probably save that employment relationship. So I think the 1-month check-in and daily or weekly at least communication with them initially is critical. The next thing that we do at 2 months, 4 months, and 6 months, we do a very short and straightforward scorecard, just talking about strengths and opportunities so that we can help people know where they stand, what our expectations are, and where they're shining and where they might need some more attention. The slide that I have for that's a little bit herky-jerky, but I'll show it to you here. You can see that on the left side, we score teamwork, quality of work, initiative and problem solving, organizational skills, communication skills, interaction with coworkers, attendance, scheduling, reliability, and attitude. Down the center column, we're just simply going to put whether that's a strength or an opportunity. And I would suggest that at 2 months, maybe even 4 months, we'll see a kind of a balance of strengths and opportunities as people learn their job and learn the organization, learn the players, learn the politics, learn the processes, and then the supervisor has an opportunity to fill in some comments in the far right section. At the narrative sections on the bottom, the supervisor is able to put in some comments. Sometimes those are just expressions of appreciation about what the supervisor has noticed in terms of how quickly or the employee has learned or some of the strides that they've made, and then we set some goals. And we do those at each 2 months, 4 months, and 6 months. Excuse me. And again, at 6 months, I would expect to see more strengths in that center column. So we've gotten now 6 months into the employment situation, and we're continuing the continuous communication loop. Excuse me just a moment. I would say we keep that communication going verbally. If there's anything that comes up, we'll want to do some feedback. We'll go on and talk about feedback here in just a moment. And then just before we get to a year, we ask our employees to provide a self-evaluation so that we know where they feel that they're standing. And I'll share some of the information that we ask them to give us feedback in just before the month that we do their annual written review. We do that in the Employees Month of Hire. I talked about that earlier, by the way, and said, if you do an annual performance review, please make sure that they're done on time. Your employees know that their review is up. We don't want them to have any anxiety about what's in it. They shouldn't have anxiety about what's in it if we've been doing our job in providing the feedback, the coaching, and the continuous communication loop throughout the year. At the 1 month in, we talked about what we asked. At the 2, 4, 6, I showed you what we asked. And throughout that next 6 months then and beyond, we want to talk about feedback. Feedback is so important, and I would say that the experts would tell you that denial or withholding of feedback is one of the most severe forms of psychological punishment we can inflict on another. And if you don't think it's important, try counting the mirrors in your house, checking out to see if your hair's right, your makeup's right, your clothes are right, that kind of thing, or try ignoring your toddler. I've heard they ask something like, 600 questions a day, why, who, what, when. So feedback's important to people of all ages, starting when we're very, very young. People really would rather get negative feedback than nothing at all. And by negative, I'm not saying punitive or mean-spirited. I always say come from kindness. But if they're off track or there are improvements that are needed, we need to give that feedback. Because people need to know when they're winning or losing. And when they're winning, we need to celebrate their successes, large and small. You know, if we completed a project, even if it's small, give them a high five, tell them thank you. And I would say to you, too, that not all employees need feedback constantly. Some people need it seldom. Some people need it on the hour, every hour, or at least every day. Only those people receiving feedback can know the proper amount of feedback. And most employers that take employee surveys, give employee surveys, almost always they hear that there's not enough recognition or feedback. So again, only the appropriate amount can only be determined by the recipient. When we're giving feedback and coaching, like I said, from 6 months to a year, or actually beginning of employment to a year, the largest impact on their performance comes from day-to-day coaching. And the key to day-to-day coaching really is trust. If that employee trusts their supervisor, if the supervisor has made it safe and welcome for that employee to have open communication and transparency, the success will be light years ahead. If we need to coach for correction when necessary, just like I said earlier, let's make sure we do it in the right time, in the right place. Let's not do it when we are angry. We really don't want to come to the table with heightened emotion. What I always tell my managers and leaders, yes, you can talk to the employee about that, but you need to get to neutral first. We don't want to come into a situation, and I know sometimes we do this with our kids. What were you thinking? We don't want to go there. We want to wait till we can get to neutral. We're not frustrated and we're not angry, and we can talk about the facts in a very reasonable manner, and hopefully then back into the solution to the situation rather than just cause someone hurt feelings or anger, defensiveness, that kind of thing. We do want to meet with the in-person, in private, so I would invite them to a meeting place without prior notice. I would probably just say, hey, would you mind popping into my office, and I'd like to have a quick conversation with you. I would start quickly and I would get right to the point. I do this even when we reach the point of terminating employment, and I know that'll be a topic for the January session, so I'd encourage you to attend the Blueprint January session. I'm sure it'll be fabulous. But I would say Start quickly, get to the point. We're here today to talk about a situation that came up or a deficiency that we need to see if we can help you with additional training. Get to the point and state the facts, not the accusations, not the interpretations, just the facts. And let's talk about the facts and not the person. We don't want to point out you did this, you did that. We'll talk about a little bit of appropriate language here in just a few slides, but we want to talk about the situation and how we're going to remedy it or how we're going to help with it. And the way we do this is we stay connected with our people. We want to reinforce behaviors that we want repeated. Make a big deal of the good stuff you want to see more of. Over-celebrate. Like I said, even if it's a small success, we got something in. We just completed our open enrollment, and thanks to our staff, we were able to say we finished that well in advance of the deadline. So we need to celebrate those things and maybe even over-celebrate and under-criticize. We're all human. We're all going to make mistakes. Some would say if you're not making mistakes, you're not doing anything. I can confess that I'm not very patient with mistakes, and I'm even my own mistakes, not very patient with those. But we need to under-criticize direct and indirect errors. We want to make a big deal of the good stuff that we want to see more of. Just to use a couple quick sports analogies, in sports and recreation, the goals are known and understood by all the players before the play begins. And that's what I talked about in the very first slide. Before the job is offered or accepted, we want to make sure that there's clarity, that people understand. So if I were to invite you to go out and play basketball in the parking lot on our lunch hour today, if the other person didn't have an understanding of how the basketball game is scored and what the rules of the game are, they wouldn't know that they get 2 points for making a basket or 3 points if they're outside the three-point line or 6 points for a touchdown, and they wouldn't enjoy the success. So we want to make sure that everyone understands the rules of the game, and our supervisors and our trainers can do that. We also want them to know what the penalties are. You know, if you don't show up for work, if you can't be in adherence to our attendance policy or you're tardy to work every day, there are going to be some penalties, and our employees need to know what those rules are. In sports and recreation, though, the rules don't change in the middle of the game, and in business, rules are changing every day. So that's why we need to be coaching, and that means supervising our teams to greater success. Coaching is taking them to levels they don't believe they can reach on their own. And again, there are some amazing stories about the synergy that employee groups can accomplish when they feel empowered and that it's safe and that their contributions are meaningful and welcome. So we'll take them to those new levels that they couldn't have reached on their own, and they'll enjoy that success. As I said before, people really dislike being measured, but everyone loves to score. And when I think about those little kids and those baskets that they're as stunned as we are that they actually got the ball in the hoop, they're elated. So help your people score more often. Help them to raise their skill level. There's a lot of talk today about upskilling and reskilling and that kind of thing in our workforce. And I would tell you, it's very real. If your staff is not interested in growing, and you're not interested in helping them grow, we'll have people that still want to use a typewriter or a calculator or the curly-Q paper on the old fax machines. And their skills become less and less relevant. And should your workplace ever lose them, they're not prepared to go out and compete in today's workplace if their skills are not up to date. And by the same token, your business will not enjoy the greater success that it will if you continue to upskill and focus on employee growth and development and keep your people on a lifetime of learning. Help them embrace that so that their skills don't become obsolete. We talked earlier about the most desired attribute in a coach or a supervisor, and that's consistency. The way people feel about their organization really is primarily dictated by the way they feel about their coach or their supervisor. We don't want them walking out the door. So if we have someone misaligned with a supervisor and there's an opportunity to move them to a different department or a different supervisor, let's do that so that we give that person the greatest chance of succeeding and our organization the greatest chance of keeping valuable employees. It's pretty easy to do the quick, great job, you're doing a super good job, thanks for the good work, as long as it's authentic and not superfluous and not silly. We only want authentic, meaningful comments. We don't want bosses or supervisors going around high-fiving everyone all day at work. But when it's meaningful, it's highly valued. But what about the other end of the spectrum? What about delivering the news that isn't as easy to deliver? When the employee's not enjoying the success or not contributing to the extent that we want them to. We want to look at some causes of poor performance, and sometimes that's the lack of clear expectations. Like I said, we need to have a clear expectation of what the job is, what the rules are, what the consequences are. So we might need to make those expectations more clear. They may have a lack of skills, knowledge, the ability to perform the tasks. And as I said, we want to help our people with upskilling and reskilling and retraining and that kind of thing. We might need to update our processes or be on a continuous process improvement path. This, again, your frontline people will be able to tell you far more effectively than anyone else what processes need to be improved and what will create more efficacy. There also could be events that are influencing our employees outside that we don't even know about. In today's world with the pandemic and our political environment, I think people are a little bit off balance anyway, but you might have some that are going through a divorce or an illness or family issues or economic distress, things we just don't know about. So always, even when we're dealing with poor performance and we're having to give some feedback, and we'll talk a little bit more about some disciplinary action, although again, I won't go too deeply into that because that's another topic. We want to come from kindness. And there's always the underperformer, the frequent flyer, those people who have made a conscious decision to underperform. It's the IDW. I don't wanna, I was gonna, I meant to. You can't figure them out. But some people think, you know what, they're paying me the same rate, hourly rate, no matter how many widgets I make today. If I make 2 widgets an hour, I still get the same hourly rate as if I make 20. So why should I work a little harder? So that's as I said, a topic for another day. Come January, we'll be working on that a little bit more in depth. But when those situations come up, work with human resources. And if you don't have a human resources department, work with a manager or your consultant or your counsel. It's always better to share that situation with the employee sooner than later, because when you don't do it sooner, when this starts in the beginning and you don't address it, it escalates, it gets more and more and gives you more and more anxiety, and it's a bigger challenge to address when the emotions are just seething, and finally you pop the cork and you address it, and you're not in neutral, and you're not necessarily proud of the way you addressed it. So if you do it in the beginning, and we can get people onto a more productive path, we can together determine that best plan of action with the employee, remembering that our shared goal really is to get them to perform at their top capacity. And they'll appreciate that too, because they'll enjoy much greater success in the workplace. These next 2 slides are pretty busy, and I didn't really want to have that much information on a slide, but I feel that the content is important enough that I went ahead and put the whole bit on there. These are 7 steps to successful delivery when you're going to have to give negative feedback. And the first one says, know the purpose. If you're doing this to help someone get to a higher performance, let's go for it. But if you're just there to get it off your chest, or it's been annoying you and you've finally reached a point where you're going to address it, it's best not to give that feedback at that point. So know your purpose. Then you want to be clear and precise and concise. You don't want to sugarcoat. You don't want to circle around so that the employee, by the time you ever get to the topic, is wondering what the heck we're talking about. Be short, quick, and to the point, and so that they know in objective terms exactly what we're talking about and what we need to do to work together to bring about a change in performance. The next one is important. I would say keep an open mind. There's a saying that says there's always 2 sides to every story. But quite frankly, I say come from curiosity. You don't know what you don't know. And while you might have a perception of what a situation is, or a deficiency or an underperformer is coming from, if you hear them out, you make it safe for them to share with you, and you give them the opportunity to engage in this conversation fully, freely, and safely, you might learn that there are some other pieces to it that you didn't know, and that will be very helpful to you and to this employee in resolving the situation. I would say it's important to seek agreement. If the person that's receiving feedback from you is not in agreement, they're not going to change their behavior. So if they don't see anything wrong with their behavior, in other words, they're in denial, they're deflecting, Well, it's because Johnny didn't get the coffee made by 9, and then I couldn't get the donuts made by 10, and it's always someone else's fault, you're probably not going to be successful. So make sure that you carry this process on until you can achieve at least some level of agreement about what the situation is and what the next steps are. We want to focus on the facts and not the person. Again, we don't want to make comments about their attitude or the person. We don't know what's going on with that person. We want to focus on the facts and the issues. We want to be respectful and courteous. That doesn't mean we want to lay down and not have a spine and not hold them accountable, but it's important to be respectful and courteous in today's environment more than ever before. And I would say we need to be prepared to take criticism. Sometimes when you're meeting with someone and you're giving them some feedback, you've had a role in their failure to succeed, and they'll come back and tell you. So I would say be curious, hear them out, and be open to the fact that you may have not described something fully enough, not given enough training, not given them the tools that they needed. So be accepting of that information. I think you'll have greater success if you follow those steps. I would say we need to choose our words carefully. I try to be careful to not be accusatory, so in place of, there are 3 little samples here, you're never on time, this is sloppy work, hey, you're fun and you like to have a good time, I would say reconsider and use the words more that are a little bit more polished and professional, such as you were 15 minutes late today and that's the 3rd time this week. We've talked in the past about tardiness. Can you help me understand how we can help you to get to work on time? The pages in this report are out of order. We've talked about this happening in the past, and can you help me understand what would help you? And then the one about the fun-loving one, maybe we could say your cheery attitude is really appreciated in the workplace. That's a good substitute that's a little bit more polished and professional in that kind of situation. When you get to a verbal warning, you want to discuss with HR what you're going to do. You want to prepare your dialogue. I would have a couple bullet points. You want to schedule and meet with the employee, document the situation and the discussion, and that can be as simple as an email to management or HR that the discussion was held and what the topics were and what agreements were made. And if you don't have an HR department, you can email it to yourself to create a timeline and a record that that verbal warning did happen. That could be important for you down the road, depending on how the situation goes and the level of success achieved, or if the employment relationship comes to a situation where you're going to end the relationship, the verbal warning will be important to have documented in the process. You want to keep the conversation with the employee and the verbal warning related to work, duties, and any impact to the organization or other employees. Again, we don't want to involve any personal information in there. If we get to the point where we're going to a performance improvement plan or an action plan, a PIP plan we call them, we want to work with human resources to prepare our documentation, meet with the employee, discuss the issues in the plan, keep the discussion and documentation, again, work-related, and allow the employee to give input and ideas for improvement and document their participation in it. Everyone's going to sign a date. It's going to be important to schedule a follow-up, and if you do, keep those follow-up appointments. You want to document any follow-up discussions, and it's important to keep those follow-up appointments because, again, if the success isn't achieved in this and we end up down a road that we're going to written disciplinary action or termination of employment, we're going to want to have that record to substantiate our efforts to help that employee get on track. Excuse me. So if we are going to we're going to turn now to the evaluation. We talked earlier about what we do at onboarding, what we do at a 1 month. We ask the employee to give us some feedback at 1 month. We give them a mild scorecard, a simple and straightforward one-page scorecard at 2 months, 4 months, and 6 months. And then we're going to go to the annual evaluation. And this little girl, like some managers are like, oh, the annual evaluation, but it really doesn't need to be a dreadful experience. If we're preparing throughout the year and keeping track of employee successes and challenges, we can focus on the positives and still give appropriate attention to any issues. We want to validate the importance of the review and complete it with timeliness. Like I said, your employees know when that review is due, and if you don't prioritize that, you're telling them they're not a priority to you. So we want to be honest. We want to lead our employees as a great leader should. And I would challenge you to think about a great leader that you had, a supervisor that you worked hard for, that you respected, and be that leader. Identify the traits that that leader had so that you can be that leader in this employee evaluation process. I would say prepare yourself to direct the conversation with eye-to-eye honesty. Don't study your shoes or minimize the importance of the review or sugarcoat things or hem and haw. Let's be transparent with one another. Let's be comfortable having a conversation. Let's be comfortable and welcoming this communication with our employees and open to their suggestions. I would caution you, some of my HR pals that are on the line today already know these things, but if you're not aware of these, there are some pitfalls to rating on performance reviews. If you're scoring people, some managers tend to do central tendency. In other words, they score everyone a B or an A or a C, but they do everyone about the same. And some managers are very lenient with their scores. They really aren't going to hold people accountable. They're going to say, you're doing a great job, you're an A student, we've never had a better employee. We all have room for improvement. And so I would say lenience is great, but holding people accountable and being accurate is better. It will help people achieve more and enjoy greater success. If you think about the recency effect, when you're doing a performance review, if someone just completed a huge project, worked extra hours, went above and beyond, and you rate everything throughout the year based on that recency, the evaluation won't be accurate. And the next one's the halo and the horns effect. If you have an affinity for an employee and you think they can't do anything wrong and they do everything right, they're going to have a halo and you're going to give them the top scores. And the same with the horns. If you have an employee that you don't have a good relationship with and you don't think they can do anything right, you're going to be a little bit too harsh on the way you score. And then we don't want to contrast or compare with similarity. Well, Johnny does a better job of this, and Susie does a better job of this, and you do a better job of this. Let's rate this individual on their own merits and help them to achieve greater success by sharing any areas that they can grow in. I told you earlier that a month before we do that annual review, we ask our employees to do a self-review, and I found this to be incredibly helpful. When we first initiated this process, our employees didn't really want to do it. And now there are times that I get 9, 10, 11, 12 pages of the employee self-review. And I would tell you that it gives the employees an opportunity to provide a written document that goes into their permanent file and becomes part of their permanent record. And it gives supervisors an opportunity to be reminded of an employee's job-related accomplishments and their efforts to keep their skill set up and their education and that kind of thing. So you can see on the screen here some of the things that we ask our employees to share with us, their job-related accomplishments, and do they have the skills and knowledge that they need to do their job? Do they use good judgment and decision-making? Are there any obstacles that we could help them with? When it comes to the quality and quantity of their work, are they consistent? What have they done to improve their knowledge? And what gives them the greatest satisfaction at work? And what are their goals? And what areas can we help them with? Knowing the answers to these things helps that employee know that they had a voice, and it helps us to help them. We rate our reviews with just a 1 to 4, from needs improvement to exceeds expectation. And some of the areas that we score have to do with their performance, quality, quantity, and productivity. You can see here that we ask them, or we score them on whether or not they're competent, whether they carry the right workload, whether they follow processes, keep their supervisor aware. Do they accept responsibility and demonstrate accountability? Do they provide superior customer service? How's their grammar? Do they complete the required training? And every bit as important as this, we also score them on their self-management. And I think this is critical. We score them on their attendance and punctuality and their professional image and whether they're involved in workplace conflict or not. And when we finish the scoring, we go to a narrative, and this gives the opportunity for managers to fill in some paragraphs that give employees thank yous for their performance and talk about their quantity and their quality and their productivity and their teamwork and their self-management, and then we identify some goals and objectives. So when we complete that review, we're giving them meaningful, concise, and timely evaluations. These are some samples of narrative verbiage that might help you to see positive and the kind of narrative language that you want to see. And then on the lower part, some areas that might need improvement before you put this kind of narrative on a review, like something like, it's been a rough year, lots of work done, can't question the home office, just do the best you can, haven't had much trouble with you this year. We don't want those kind of comments on anyone's review. And remember, you're the author of these reviews, so your authorship is going to be in that file for a long time. The review should come across as being about the employee and not the manager. So I would say avoid phrases that unintentionally reinforce your authority. So instead of saying things like, I've never seen an employee who responds so well to change, you might say, you respond to change far better than most. Or, I'd like to see you take a class in Excel. It would sound better to say, it would make it more about the employee if you say, please complete a course in Excel. These I statements really don't belong in the review because the review is about the employee. And again, I want to say that we want to make only job-related observations and comments. This is a little bit more lighthearted, and I would say it's fine to come from kindness and patience, but don't allow yourself to compromise on holding staff accountable. Remember, your highest performers are watching you, and they're evaluating your leadership every day. So again, a little bit lighthearted here on the eval. You want to avoid comments like, all the employees just love you, or you weren't able to participate as much this year due to your medical condition, your leave, your pregnancy, your car wreck, or your performance this year was down. But now that your meds are changed, I'm sure you'll do better. We want to avoid any kind of comments like that that come from personal. Everything on the review needs to be job related. So timely completion of reviews during the probationary period in Montana is especially important. We're the only not at will state. As you write the evaluation, speak to the recipient, not an unknown third party. So if you want to say, Susie Q, you did a great job this year, you don't want to put on the performance review, Susan Jones did a great job this year. You want to say, Susie, you did a great job this year. Make only job-related observations and comments. Read their input and their goals. Take an interest in and discuss these issues. Don't be surprised if there are differences in what the employee states their perception is and yours. We can manage that. It's okay to stretch good people. We can give them opportunities to come to a reconciliation of what they think they've done and what their manager thinks they've done. Have the employee review his or her job description and participate in updating their job description at least annually. This will come in to help you more times than not if the employee is succeeding or not succeeding. You don't want to have an employee that comes to you and says, well, I didn't know that was part of my job. I didn't know I was supposed to do that. If they signed and dated their job description and they participated in updating it annually, they'll know what the expectation is. And we go right back to the first screen about the importance of clarity in that. And again, this could be a vital document if the employment relationship doesn't work out down the road. So your challenge today is to equip your people with clear expectations and hold them accountable for behaviors and outcomes. Express sincere appreciation on a consistent basis and don't do anything phony, silly, or superfluous. People will see right through that. Actively seek learning and growth opportunities for your staff. Help them upskill, reskill, get new skills, and celebrate their successes. They'll rise to the occasion. They'll share their creative ideas. They'll perhaps help you grow your business to new levels. Remember, people leave their supervisors, so match them to the right supervisor. And with that, I want to wish you the best. I want to thank you for your time today. If you have any questions that I could ever help with, I'm happy to do it. My contact information is here, and I'm sure that we might have a few minutes left for some questions. So with that, I'll turn it back to you, Sarah.
Excellent presentation, Deb. Thank you. And so we do have just a few questions we're going to try to run through here. First of all, what do you think is the most important piece of balancing keeping employees satisfied and managing their deficiencies?
Well, I would say, in my humble opinion, the most important piece in that delicate balance is culture. If your culture doesn't offer a safe and approachable leadership style, you really won't know where improvements are needed until you've lost staff and the investment you've made in them. Your time, resources, reputation, institutional knowledge walks right out the door with your investment.
Ouch, there's so much truth in that too.
Yeah.
Seeing it from, I've been both the employee and management end, and as you were speaking, I'm over here just cheering for you, like, yeah, that's right. And then you had me laughing out loud a few times too with your examples. Sorry, I should probably get focused. What do you recommend when you realize you've made a hire who is not going to work out?
You know, there does come a time there comes a time that it's clear the relationship isn't going to work out and a decision needs to be made. And I would say I'm a real strong proponent of transparency, and I've found a measure of success in visiting with that employee early on and having a conversation. It's not an easy conversation. I find it productive to sit with the individual and enter the conversation gently, stating that there have been challenges from the organization standpoint, and perhaps give some samples of deficiencies, and ask the individual how the experience has been from their vantage point. I come from curiosity, and like I said before, you don't know what you don't know, but you might be interested to know what their perspective. Maybe they need additional training, and maybe this just isn't a good fit. But at the end of the conversation, I'm a strong proponent of letting them know that the employment relationship may not be a good fit for both, and that you'll stay in touch over the next whatever period of time you choose. Maybe it's a week, maybe it's a few days, preferably before the probationary period is up in Montana. But you'll be in touch with them as decisions and directions that we're going to go are made. And I think that's fair to employees. It's just like the review. You don't want to walk in and surprise them with a great review or a terrible review without them having some idea. And the same with a termination. If they have a heads up that the employment relationship might be severed, I think it would be the humane thing to do.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, that little bit of extra time and attention to communicate just makes such a difference to help somebody
Yep.
know where they stand. Do you really think that the email at 1 month is needed?
Absolutely. If there's one thing that I think is absolutely critical, it's that. I can think of a number with the employers that I've worked for over, unfortunately, way too many decades. We've lost stellar help that in that first month, they just didn't feel at ease. They didn't know where they stood. Even myself, I worked for, I can't believe I'm going to say this, I worked for an eye doctor for 6 weeks. And I was like, this is not for me. And I went in to let the doctor know I was leaving, and he said, no, no, no. If we wanted you to be here, you're way here. You've got to stay. And I'm like, but I didn't know where I was. And I know when I talked with the radio announcer earlier, he said the same thing happened to him. He was in a job for a few months, and he went in to give his resignation, and they said, we love you. We love the work you're doing. So if you're going to participate in making your new hire successful, there are some things you need to know, and only that new employee can give you that knowledge. Do you have a supervisor who's power-driven, he's on a power trip? Do you have a schedule that makes regular and reliable attendance difficult? Do you have processes that are risky or out of compliance that make someone nervous? This is the time to find out, because if there's an issue that you can fix, or even if there's a conflict, can you reassign the employee to someone else? You could save an employee who might become the longest-term employee, or in one case that I know of, the business owner, the next business owner of that organization, if you're able to keep that employee and get through those struggles.
Well, even just that explanation again made me want to know more of these stories that you've got on file about successes that you've come across. I mean, I can tell that you could just go for days. But one last question we'll try to hit here is, do you give employees a copy of their evaluation?
I do. I give employees a copy of anything that they've signed, and I'm a real proponent of giving a copy of the evaluation to them. I will tell you that in today's environment, when we're all looking for great employees, and we all are, it's not always easy to get references from other companies, and it's sometimes we are handcuffed in what we can give, and it is what it is. But if we can get an applicant to provide us the copy of their last 2 performance reviews, we get a much clearer picture and of the predictability of their workplace success or the lack thereof, providing, of course, that the prior company engaged in accurate and substantiated performance on their reviews. And we're using that on a pretty regular basis when a prior employer can't give that, or in some cases when the employee is still employed and doesn't want us to contact their current employer. That evaluation can become very valuable to an employer and to that employee who might be seeking a job.
Of all the different jobs I've applied for in my life, I can't say that I've ever once thought of using a review as a work reference. And it makes so much sense now. Could there be anything more official than that?
Exactly. As long as that employer, as I said, is giving reviews that are accurate and not, just sugarcoating it and saying you did a great job when they really didn't.
True. What good is that then, really?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, Deb, thank you so much for giving your time and sharing your expertise on this topic with us today. I think that we've all really enjoyed this and gotten a lot out of it. I appreciate the way that you make this information so understandable and relatable.
Thank you.
So following a few announcements, we will leave up Deb's contact information in case you have any further questions for her or would like to request a copy of her slide presentation today. Now, a quick reminder for those who have not reported their attendance yet to enter your name, company name, and city in the chat box. The Blueprint team will take a break in December to prepare for another season of great business education seminars and wishes everybody very happy holidays. We look forward to starting the new year off strong with our January Blueprint for Business Success seminar, Documentation, Discipline, and Terminations with Cindy Carpenter from Carpenter Business Resources. In February, we will learn about creating and retaining a diverse workforce with Andrea Hardin from the Montana Human Rights Bureau. As a reminder, there will be an anonymous 2-minute survey that pops up when you leave today, and your participation will help us improve this program and provide meaningful topics and content. Thank you again for attending.